Greetings, welcome to the Dr. J Vlog Series. It's Wednesday, December 31st, 2025, which of course means we've reached the last day of the current calendar year. And the new year is upon us, 2026. And in one sense, as we revolve around the sun, we basically find ourselves back right where we started. That is, in terms of our position relative to the sun. But in just about every other aspect of our lives, everything's changed to some degree, physically, biologically, mentally, culturally, perhaps even spiritually. So what do I mean? Well, again, certainly in the physical sense, we're back to where we started, as I say, relative to the sun. But by the same token, as many of you well know, the sun's no longer in the same place that it was a year ago either. It's moving around the center of our Milky Way galaxy at about 500,000 miles per hour. So that means we've traveled about 4.5 billion miles since last January 1st. Did you notice? Do you like the view where we are now compared to 4.5 billion miles away? Probably didn't notice. But for someone my age, that also means that I've moved about 300 billion miles from where I was born. And of course, we say we like to go back to the place where we were born. Well, I'll never be able to go back to that place, literally, where I was born, at least relative to the galactic center of the Milky Way. And neither will you. And we have no choice then but to keep moving, to keep changing. And as much as we might crave certainty and stability, as human beings, we're forever in a constant state of change. We're a year older, certainly. And the physical and the biological self have changed to a certain degree, right? You've noticed that. You notice yourself aging. You notice that you feel a little bit different today, don't you, than you did a year ago. Maybe very similar, and maybe the changes are quite subtle, but you've changed nonetheless, haven't you? Yeah, we still have about 30 trillion cells in our bodies total, but we replace about a third of a trillion cells, an estimated 330 to maybe 350 billion cells every single day. There are many different types of cells, to be sure, some being replaced much more often than others, like our skin cells or those that line our guts. But regardless, you're comprised of a vastly different set of 30 trillion cells today than you were a year ago. But again, you probably don't really notice. Mentally, what has changed? Sure, you can probably identify some stable traits and personality characteristics in yourself. We all have them. But these can change too, albeit much more slowly typically. And yet, changes do occur. At the very least, you've processed a year's worth of information through your lived experiences. You almost certainly don't remember every moment or everything that you've learned, but think of just how much information processing that remarkable computer, your brain, has done just in the past year alone. All the books and the online articles and posts that you've read, the lectures and the TV shows and the podcasts that perhaps you've listened to, the countless interactions with other people in real life and virtually or online. You should really take a moment then, think about and appreciate just how much information you've been able to process, and how much you've truly learned since last year alone. And after all that living and learning, the world must look a little different today than it did a year ago. And again, that's just from your own sort of narrow perspective, because at the same time, everyone else and the world itself has changed since last year too. Sure, you might still have the same name, maybe live in the same house in the same country, but all that changed at least a little bit too, right? Maybe you have changed your name, or maybe acquired a new nickname along the way. In my case, our house certainly looks quite different today compared to this time last year. Same address, but much has changed. Now, what happened, in the short version of the story is that we had a leak in our roof last year, and it did some significant damage to the inside of our house. Bummer, but also an opportunity. Because with the damage, we decided to build an extension rather than just repairing the damaged parts. And so that negative, in effect, ended up being a positive because the changes have enriched our lives, our living spaces, which feel more comfortable and inviting. That wasn't even in my thinking a year ago, and yet here we are. Housing, of course, it's a big issue for everyone. I don't care who you are, what your station in life, how wealthy you are, and so on. We all need a place to live, a place to sleep. And it's always a major challenge then if you have to move to a new place, to a new home, to say nothing of a new country. Now, one of our sons, for example, has just moved back from Windsor, back in London, after spending the last 11 years in the former city, first earning his university degree, and then securing full-time employment, getting his first car, and so on. And so moving back to London's a big change after more than a decade, right? Living in a totally different city. And so much more has changed too, depending upon who you are. So for example, 4 of our 5 sons either changed their jobs in this past year or started new ones after maybe being off for a while. And my wife was off on leave for a couple of months too this past year, unexpectedly, but she's back at work on a part-time basis. And I've stayed basically in the same job, but even I taught a new course last year that I hadn't taught previously. So there's a little bit of change introduced into my work life as well. And of course, there are so many other things of significance that have happened along the way, along with hundreds, thousands, countless minor details, all of which can be evaluated as positive or negative depending upon our perspective. And some of these are obviously big changes, right? They include not just whether you live in the same house and you end up going to the same job or starting a new one, but the changes can be, in all spheres, just about any sphere of your life, right? They might include the start of a new relationship with a significant other, or the ending of such a relationship. It could be a serious health issue that you didn't expect, or perhaps a major recovery. The loss of a loved one, like a parent or a grandparent, someone close to you, or maybe the birth of a new child, or a friend's child, or the start of a new relationship, and so on, or a new friendship. So almost any great teacher then, any guru, will tell you some variation of the theme that the key to a fulfilling and enlightened life involves acceptance of the state of inevitable change. Really, it's the ability to, as REO Speedwagon sang back in 1978, to roll with the changes. I'll leave a link in the description below. To flow like the water, to allow conscious self to be immersed in, at one with, if you will, the universe. And that's quite the challenge, especially for people like me, who grew up in this, very Western dualistic way of thinking and, separating ourselves from the world and et cetera, et cetera. But the point here isn't that we don't do anything when I say we're going to flow like water. It doesn't mean we don't exert any effort. We are energetic beings. But the water is also filled with energy, right? We just don't think of it as having consciousness per se. We don't think of the water as making an active decision, shall we say, to flow around the stump or the boulder that might be impeding its progress. But at some level, actually, that might not be true. In other words, I can well imagine that the water, with the energy that's binding the molecules together and the forces at play to help them move that water along, all of this might speak to a much deeper level of universal consciousness that connects energy and matter. But that's another story for another day. So whatever your beliefs in this regard, you can certainly observe how the water moves and adapts and conforms with the spaces in which it flows. How the river bends in response to the earth and the hills and the valleys. And even the water itself, how it impacts the earth, how it impacts the stones, eroding and carving out new spaces. And that's what we do too, as human beings. We carve out spaces and places to exist. You're doing that at this very moment, as am I. And so as you listen to my voice, okay, at this particular time, we're carving out a shared existence together. However brief, our minutes together are just a few sentences, if you will, in the chapter of our lives, this particular chapter, I should say, of our lives. And we're writing many chapters. It's just part of the story. And every good story has twists and turns along the way and keeps moving forward. And that's one crucial way to think about our shared task in 2026, to keep moving forward, to keep on rolling, to be the water that flows forth across the landscape, providing sustenance for all that lives and breathes, allowing ourselves and ourselves to function, providing comfort or warmth or coolness, whatever's required in a particular environment. And water provides so much more that I'll almost certainly do a separate, well, actually probably a series of vlogs on water later this year in 2026. I actually did one last year, but in a bit of a different context, or a different theme, shall I say. Most importantly, though, our task then is to keep moving, to keep writing the narrative of our respective lives, at least metaphorically, if not literally, like with an autobiography. So I became, for example, aware just today of a person who's deeply concerned about the next world, or life after death, and who in many ways has stopped living in this world out of fear, out of concerns that they're not doing the right things, that they could be corrupted, that they're worried about simply being in this world. And so they've been retreating not out of enlightenment, but out of fear. And I don't know what loving person or loving God or creator would want us to live in a constant state of fear. Fear so often paralyzes us. It keeps us from acting, from moving forward. We sometimes freeze with fear. And of course, hatred's even worse, often born of fear too, because then we're motivated to hurt others and create fear in them. We're impeding the flow of life. And if we're afraid, we're letting others or other sources impede the flow of our lives. So, my dear friends, I'm speaking to each of you individually now, much like Mr. Rogers would have done with his show and addressing the children in his audience, right? And aren't we all still children at some level? So, my friends, do not be afraid. Let go of the fear. Allow yourself then to flow forth with your many gifts. Share yourself and your resources in the most natural and life-affirming ways of which you are aware at this particular moment and at this stage in your lives. That's a great thing. And finally, never despair, never give up. Think of the biggest challenges that you faced in your life, up to this point at least. And for a moment, perhaps, and I know we don't necessarily like to do this, but think of the worst moment, the lowest moment where you might have felt completely lost or hopeless. And maybe at that lowest of the low moments, you felt like you could see no future, no path forward in this life. And you might have even been suicidal, some of you. And yet, look at yourself now. You're here now. How do I know? Because you're listening or watching this vlog. That means you did manage to carve out a path forward. You didn't give up, you resilient human being, you. And of course, you know that in your heart of hearts, your story isn't complete. There's much more to be written. And here you are, and here am I. So let's do one last thing together as part of the Dr. J experience, shall we? Let's share a quiet moment together. So just for the next few seconds, no particular number of seconds or time frame here, just close your eyes and just be. No judgment, no thoughts, no worries, just being. Ready? Here we go. Okay, just a few seconds, just being. I hope you understand that what I mean what I'm talking about when I say just being, because you are a human being. So when you start to struggle with your life, and we all, we all struggle occasionally, right? If you find yourself starting to get anxious or upset or angry, try to pause and redirect your energies to the calm, Tap into your water source, shall we say, and allow yourself to start flowing again, for you are not separate from that which upsets you, which I'll talk about another day. It's all part of the story, part of your story, part of our story. And it's all central to the life drama in the best sense of that term. You are a human being, whatever you're supposed to be. And don't worry or stress over exactly what that is for now. And don't go searching to find yourself either, for that's another distraction, so I'll discuss another day. So in 2026, rather, the most important or the crucial thing that you can do involves just being a human being. And that's the best place to be, at least in this particular form. It's not nothing or nothingness. It's something. It's being. And no, I don't know exactly where that being will go or where the water ultimately ends up being deposited or flowing towards for myself or for anyone else. But in the best moments, it's enough just to be that river and enjoy every bit of the scenery, every view, every encounter along the way. And enlightened people, or those at least who are waking up everywhere, will be glad to see you as the life-affirming or another life-affirming source of water in their lives. So that's my wish for you in 2026, to be the water. So may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, dole out hugs in abundance, and continue to flow like water, like a human, just being. I hope to see you soon. All the best. Happy New Year, 2026 and beyond.